Okay, so Nuggets Clippers. Well, I think the most important things are if the Nuggets can actually defend the Clippers in this series, and then how the Clippers will deal with Jokic and Murray. Some things to make note of: Gary Harris is back, and I think they could put him on Lou Williams, and he could have some success there. Patrick Beverley is maybe going to be back. I think I saw a thing where Doc said that he's hopeful that Beverley can play in Game 1. That'll make a difference on Jamal Murray, certainly, who we have to respect a little bit more after his Round 1 performance, even if his Game 7 wasn't amazing. But I do want to start with how the Nuggets will defend the Clippers, because I think this is probably the make it or break it point of this series. Denver's defense. They finished 15th in the regular season, or 16th, but they were not good for a good stretch of the year. And their defense was bad at times against Utah, and if it wasn't for Murray going crazy, they don't win that series. So, I mean, I think the first things to look at are just, honestly, is Paul Millsap going to be good again? I mean, Millsap for a long time, good fundamental defender, defend a bunch of positions and all that stuff, and he just hasn't been good lately. And if he's not going to be there, then I think it's kind of impossible for the Nuggets to do it defensively. I mean, they're going to need him, Torrey Craig, Gary Harris, Jeremy Grant to all play up to their ceilings defensively. With Gary Harris, it's sticking to Lou Williams. With Millsap, Grant, and Craig, it's defending some Kawhi and Paul George isolations, because the Clippers are going to go to that. And you got to be able to not foul and just be physical with those guys and not allow them to just get the shots they want to get. I know that sounds really obvious, but a lot of the time with Kawhi, he just gets to that spot around 15 feet or whatever, and it just seems like he doesn't miss a lot of the time. And I mean, he's going to make his threes, and he's going to get fouled as well. But if you can just make it as tough as possible on him, then that'd be huge. And I don't know if there's really going to be a Kawhi guy in this series. I mean, I guess, again, if Millsap can be good and be the Millsap that we've known him to be for such a long time, then maybe he would be the best choice. I mean, he's not as athletic as Jeremy Grant, I'll give you that, but I feel like his strength in the half court could match Kawhi's, and dare Kawhi to take a couple of shots that he wouldn't really want to take. He can still make them, but, you know, rather than a comfortable 12-footer, maybe it's a slightly off-balance 17-footer or something from the guy. Or instead of a layup or a dunk, it's a little bit of a hook shot thing, and he might miss a couple extra of those types of shots, that sort of thing. Now, I think the Jokic pick and rolls are very important as well, but this is the first thing, really. It's just, Nuggets have guys who can just simply match up on their dude and defend them capably enough? I don't know. I mean, I think, can you put Jeremy Grant on Paul George and have success? Hopefully. I think Grant is built for that sort of thing, and Paul George is not an amazing mid-range shooter. He's good, but ever since he left Indiana, his mid-range numbers have dropped off kind of a lot, to the point now where I think if you dare him to take some 18-footers, he will miss some. But it's also like, can they stick with Paul George when he starts doing his off-ball stuff? Because he does like to do a bit of that, and I don't know. I mean, if the Clippers start forcing the Nuggets into switches, and now you've got Murray or Monte Morris or Michael Porter Jr., I think there's something to talk about with MPJ. But if you got those guys switched onto Kawhi or PG or whoever, then I think you're going to have a lot of trouble. Gary Harris is also interesting. I mean, I do think, again, he can have some success on Lou Williams, but when you're talking about Gary Harris against PG and Kawhi and the size mismatch there, that could be something. Another thing about this Clippers team and why they're tough to defend is there's really no one to leave wide open. I mean, their worst shooter other than Zubats and Harrell would be like JaMychal Green, who's still pretty good from outside, so that makes it all the tougher for a team that has not been too good defensively. They're not going to have somebody they can just ignore and assume they're going to miss. Anyway, if we now can get to those screens, because they're going to run some with Zubats and Harrell and whoever, are they going to have Jokic step up on those screens? Whenever the Nuggets have been a good defensive team, which was last season pretty much, a lot of it came from them asking Jokic to do more on defense than simply dropping. If they drop on those, I think you're just going to give Kawhi and PG runways to the basket, you're going to give them open jump shots, and I don't think you're going to win that way. Similar things to be said about Lou Williams as well. So I think you're going to have to get a little more creative, whether that's double teaming guys sometimes and daring them to be passers, whether that's having, again, Jokic step up on the screen. I don't totally know. Another option you do have if you want to get a little wild, and I don't know if Mike Malone's going to try this, but you could have Millsap defend the Clippers' big guy. Because in a perfect world, he would be able to handle him on the boards and all that, and then he could just switch onto the ball handler when it's Kawhi or PG. Now, the thing with that, though, is where do you stick Jokic for that to happen? I mean, you could put Jokic on Morris or Shamet or whoever, but even then, they can get that guy involved in some plays, and I think Jokic is still going to have to work for it, and I think it's fair to think that Jokic is going to struggle defensively when the Clippers really go at him. So I don't totally know. I mean, you could double team. I think I mentioned that real quick. You could double team Kawhi or PG or Lou or whoever, but again, the Clippers have so much shooting that it's going to be tough to really execute that anyway. You're going to have to do a really good job of like who you leave open and closing out, and with a Denver defense that has spent so much of this season being not good, I just don't know if we can expect them to do that successfully. It should also be mentioned that Michael Porter Jr., who might have to play in this series because they just might need that much offense against this Clippers defense, he's probably going to have a tough time on defense here. I mean, he had some ugly stretches against Utah. The Clippers are, of course, a better offensive team than the Jazz, and so they're probably going to have ways to go at MPJ, and it could get rough. I think in ISOs and rotations and basically everything, he could get really, really exposed in this series. So yeah, basically I have my doubts on Denver being able to defend the Clippers. I think for them to be successful, they would just need guys to play better than you'd expect. Like again, Millsap hasn't been good against the Jazz. Jokic is who he is. Murray made some strides defensively this season. We'll give him that. I don't know if he's on that level. And, I mean, is Jeremy Grant going to save the day and just be Dennis Rodman out there? That's probably a little too optimistic. But, of course, the Clippers are going to have to defend the Nuggets. I actually want to start with Michael Porter Jr., just because I mentioned him a second ago. So, it's unfair to ask MPJ to score like 20 a game in this series. The guy's played like 900 NBA minutes. It's simply too much to ask of him. That being said, if the Nuggets have any chance of winning the series, he's probably going to have to go off. And I do think the Nuggets could create some good opportunities for him off of Jokic stuff, and we'll get to the Jokic thing in a second, his post-ups and all that, but I think he could have some open shots generated for him if he sets screens for Murray, sets screens for Jokic, if Jokic sets screens for MPJ. I mean, hell, they could have Jamal Murray set screens for MPJ. The Nuggets will do kind of anything when it comes to that sort of thing. And I do think he could get some driving lanes. I think he could get some mismatches, because there are some little guys on this Clippers team who MPJ could go at, although Patrick Beverley, if he's playing, probably not one of those guys. But if he gets switched onto Lou Will, Shamet, Reggie Jackson, I think he can beat Marcus Morris and JaMychal Green off the dribble. Like, he's going to have some opportunities to score in the series, certainly. Although I do think Kawhi and PG could defend him. But again, let's not ask too much of Michael Porter Jr. The guy's barely played in the NBA. But he had his moments against the Jazz. He also had his bad moments against the Jazz as well. So, if we talk about Jokic, so I think Jokic could have a lot of success in the post in the series. Zubats should be better at defending him in the low post than Harrell. But I think Jokic can beat Harrell off the dribble. I think he can beat Zubats off the dribble, I should say. I think he can beat Zubats on pick and pops. Whereas with Harrell, I think he can kill Harrell on the block. So I will not be surprised if Jokic puts up a lot of points in this series. And should be said, Jokic is kind of unfazed by a lot of this stuff. I mean, the guy had 28 points and really good efficiency and whatever else against the Jazz in a Game 7 where basically everybody else had a tough time scoring. So this dude, he's really good. You know, Jokic is definitely the something best player in the NBA. So I do expect him to still be really good in this series. I think the Clippers could have some success with disrupting his passing game. As the Mavericks series went on, they did a better job of tipping some of Luka's passes because, the Clippers are a bunch of good, big defenders. So you got PG, you got Kawhi, you got Jermichael Green, you got Marcus Morris just reaching with their wingspans to get some passes and predicting where the pass is going to go. And I think they could do a similar thing against Jokic. I don't know if they're going to do it in game 1, but maybe by game 3 or 4 they could have it down. So we'll see what they want to do, how aggressively they want to double team Jokic, if they're just going to be content with daring him to make shot after shot in the post. I don't know, but I do think he's going to be good in this. I think he can beat Zubac. I think he can bully Harrell on the block, and we'll see how the Clippers want to react to it. I'm sure they're going to swipe at him, and they're going to swarm on him, and they're going to dare Millsap and Torrey Craig and whoever else to make threes, and they were good from 3 in against the Jazz, so that's going to be interesting. I do think there's a chance the Nuggets could score some points in this series. I think the Clippers can defend the Nuggets' cutting action off of Jokic and stuff, so there's that. If we talk about Jamal Murray and how he could have success in this, well, actually, one more thing I want to talk about is with Jokic and Murray, the two-man game, before we just talk about Murray exclusively. So the Nuggets really like their Murray-Jokic free throw line screen thing, where sometimes it's Murray setting the screen for Jokic to force a switch. And the Clippers could counter that by putting a bigger guy on Murray right away. I don't know if they're going to. I feel like Beverly is going to start on Murray if Beverly's playing. But maybe you put Morris on Murray or something as a way to have a bigger guy switch onto Jokic right away. Now, even then, you're probably still putting a big guy on Murray. If you've switched it, maybe you just put Beverly on Murray and you do everything you can to not give the Nuggets the switch. Because I think Beverly, if he gets switched onto Jokic, that's going to be an advantage for Jokic, certainly. I don't totally know. But I would imagine the Clippers are going to find ways to not just give the Nuggets every single switch that they want to get. The other thing that the Nuggets will do is they'll have Jokic screen for Murray at the top of the key, and then Murray will get the big guy committed to him. He'll back it back out, and that forces a switch, and usually Jokic is around the free throw line in this scenario with Murray's initial defender on him now. Again, I don't know what the Clippers are going to do exactly to counter that sort of stuff, but I'm sure they're going to find something. Another interesting thing is if the Clippers will go small, because I already think they have an advantage with Harrell, as in the Nuggets have an advantage because Jokic can post him up. So if the Clippers go small, how's that going to work? If you go Beverly, Kawhi, PG, I guess Lou is out there, then maybe you're going Jermichael Green or something. Maybe Jokic will just have an even bigger advantage. I don't know. You could convince me of a lot of things there. But Jokic is so good that he might force the Clippers to have to play a bigger lineup than they would typically like to. I think we could see the Nuggets attacking Lou Williams a lot in this as well, because you look for the weak links defensively on the Clippers, and it's kind of Lou Williams. That and I guess Harrell. So that could be interesting. I imagine Lou will be defending like Torrey Craig a lot of the series. He could defend Monte Morris just because they match up similarly, but Monte does a bit of stuff in the Nuggets offense, so we'll see. I mean, if Torrey Craig is suddenly involved in way more action because Lou Will is on him, I feel like the Clippers will take that as a win because it's the Nuggets. It's either worst offensive player, Torrey Craig, probably, suddenly being more of a focal point in the offense, so the trade-off of them targeting Lou Will might be set by the fact that Torrey Craig's just not out there for his offense, you know? So we'd have to see with that one. Anyway, if we talk about Jamal Murray a little bit, so if Beverly is back, then that's certainly going to even the odds for the Clippers being able to slow down Murray. I think they could try double-teaming Murray at times if he starts to get really going. I mean, I think they're going to play him conventionally at first. I mentioned the way that the Nuggets like to get switches, and we'll see what they want to do there. But I do think for some of it, it's just going to be they're going to put Beverly or Shamet or whoever on Murray, and they're just going to see what happens. But if Murray does have success, if he can get by Beverly, if he can hit those mid-rangers, if he can make some threes and make some pull-up threes and things like that and beat Harrell or Zubats on switches or whatever, if he's able to do that, then I do think the Clippers could start double-teaming him or trapping him a little bit more. I don't know if we're going to see much Kawhi or PG on him in this series. It is actually interesting to see who Kawhi and PG defend, because the two best players on the Nuggets, outside of MPJ potentially having a big series here, is the point guard and the center, who you typically would not have PG and Kawhi defend. So I don't really know how they're going to do with that. I mean, I don't think you want to waste Kawhi's defensive stuff on Paul Millsap. I mean, you're going to put him there sometimes to preserve Kawhi's energy, but I don't know. That'll be something to make note of. But do I think we could sometimes see some Paul George or Kawhi on Jamal Murray? I would say sometimes, but not that much, I imagine. What else is there to think about? I guess just Doc and Mike Malone adjustments. Who would I give the advantage to? I think I would give it to Doc. I still don't know if Mike Malone's a good coach. Part of me feels like they win in spite of him, more so than because of him. But even so, their defense has been rough. I don't think it's Mike Malone's fault that Paul Millsap has just suddenly become worse on defense, you know what I mean? So yeah, I think the formula for the Nuggets winning this series is Jokic kills Zubats and Harrell. The Nuggets can attack Lou Williams a lot. And the Nuggets' other guys, Millsap, Jeremy Grant, Torrey Craig, Monte Morris, Gary Harris, just make threes. And then on the other end, they do a better job than you would expect at just playing tough defense. Gary Harris making Lou Will's day tough. Millsap being able to match up on anybody, but hopefully Kawhi or PG if they really need him to do that. Torrey Craig and Jeremy Grant, similar thing. And Jokic not getting torched out there, which I think is definitely a possibility. And Michael Porter Jr. probably being an average defender and a very good offensive player. I think it's too much to ask of the Nuggets to do all that. I think this team needs to improve defensively, and as far as how they do that, I don't know, but I don't think it's going to happen in this series. So I do think the Clippers will win. Hopefully it's good, and yeah.